All right, good afternoon, everybody. As I've said for months, the state of Georgia would not tolerate the repeated acts of violence and destruction that have occurred in an attempt to stop the construction of the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center, a state-of-the-art facility for firefighters, EMTs, and law enforcement. I vowed as Attorney General to hold accountable those responsible for those actions. Today, I am pleased to announce the latest development in our vigorous pursuit of the suspects. Following an investigation conducted by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the Atlanta Police Department, the Georgia Department of Public Safety, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and other law enforcement partners, our office took this case to a Fulton County grand jury on August 29th. Based on the evidence we presented, the grand jury has returned an indictment charging 61 people with violation of the Georgia Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Some are also charged with domestic terrorism, attempted arson in the first degree, and money laundering. As alleged in the indictment, the defendants are members of Defend the Atlanta Forest, an anarchist, anti-police, and anti-business extremist organization. We contend these 61 defendants together have conspired to prevent the construction of the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center by conducting, coordinating, and organizing acts of violence, intimidation, and property destruction. Among the items we obtained during our investigation were writings from an anarchist supporter who confirms the strategy that engaging in violence will bring attention to the group's political goals. As alleged in the indictment, the defendants used social media and other open source outlets such as Scenes blog to advocate, boast, and take credit for their destruction. The indictment lists 225 incidents in which we allege that the defendants worked together to prevent the construction of the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center. These alleged incidents include, but are not limited to, the following. On July 5th, 2020, members of the group attacked the Georgia Department of Public Safety headquarters by throwing rocks and hurling a Molotov cocktail through the window, resulting in the injury of 2 employees in the building catching fire. On May 17th, 2022, defendants hurled Molotov cocktails and glass bottles at police officers at the training center site. On December 13th, 2022, defendants threw fireworks at firefighters and EMTs, damaged an APD vehicle, and cut the safety rope of an arborist working in one of the trees on the site. On multiple occasions, members of the group torched and caused other damage to buildings and construction equipment, including excavators and bulldozers owned by contractors associated with the project, and then claimed responsibility for the destruction. Members of the group used the Scenes blog to call for a night of rage to occur on January 21st, 2023, during which defendants committed arson and property damage, an attempt to break into 191 Peachtree, where the offices of the Atlanta Police Foundation and other businesses are located. On March 5th, 2023, a member of the group punched a police officer, and an organized mob attacked other law enforcement who were guarding the training center site, and the crowd proceeded to set construction vehicles on fire. On July 3rd, 2022, at least one member of the group vandalized historic Ebenezer Baptist Church. On multiple occasions, members of the group harassed and intimidated law enforcement, including traveling to the home of a state trooper. And on multiple occasions, members of the group harassed and intimidated contractors and construction workers for their roles in the project, including trespassing on and destroying their property in Georgia, Florida, New York, Oregon, Michigan, and Minnesota. As the indictment asserts, members of Defend the Atlanta Forest subscribe to a philosophy of anarchy. They hold a core belief that society should abolish police, government, and private business. And as further alleged, they're willing to bring about such changes, quote, by any means necessary, end quote, including violence. In order to advance their agenda, we contend that this group has actively recruited and trained others from Georgia, around the country, and across the globe to participate in this criminal enterprise. The overwhelming majority of those we have indicted are, in fact, from other states, and one is from another country. We assert that members of Defend the Atlanta Forest, guided by their extreme worldview, united in opposition to the construction of the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center, and in opposition to any company associated with the project. Listen to the words written by a Defend the Atlanta Forest member, and I quote, "The idea is, if you deal with the Atlanta Police Foundation, you'll deal with us. For this one contract, people are coming to your house. For this one contract, people are visiting your church. For this one contract, people are flooding your phone lines. People are sending you faxes. People are visiting your office. Some people are vandalizing your stores, are burning your equipment for the one contract," end quote. And this was chanted repeatedly during a public hearing at Atlanta City Hall just this past June. If you build it, we will burn it. If you build it, we will burn it. As alleged in the indictment, members of Defend the Atlanta Forest flatly reject the rule of law and do not recognize governmental authority. A sign reading, quote, "You are now leaving the USA," end quote, was featured at the training site and also in social media and blog posts about the group. Similar to the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, also known as the Chaz, that was created and occupied by anarchists in 2020 in Seattle, Washington, we contend that members of Defend the Atlanta Forest unlawfully occupied the land in Atlanta where the training center is set to be built. They lived illegally in and around the trees on this property for nearly 2 years. In order to barricade the site, we assert that the defendants set sharp traps designed to injure anyone who might approach them, including law enforcement officers. As further alleged in the indictment, the defendants used incendiary devices, such as Molotov cocktails, large mortar-style fireworks, and were in the process of constructing a rudimentary explosive device. In one incident, we contend that members of Defend the Atlanta Forest trapped an unsuspecting civilian who'd approached the area and held him at gunpoint. As alleged in the indictment, the Defend the Atlanta Forest is financially supported by the Network for Strong Communities. While the Network for Strong Communities portrays itself as a legitimate, charitable, social justice organization, we contend that this group is operating several bank accounts, commingling funds from various causes, and raising money to establish and maintain the autonomous zone within the forest. As a result, thousands of good faith donors gave millions of their own money to a certain charitable cause, and their funds instead were spent on ammunition, surveillance materials, and a drone, among other out-of-scope items. Violence is not political speech, and I will never understand how we got to where we are today. It's important to remember these acts of violence are in response to the fact that the residents of Atlanta have rightly chosen to build a state-of-the-art public safety training center, a complex that will provide best-in-class training for first responders, firefighters, and law enforcement officers, the professionals who ensure our safety, who we call in times of crisis, who show up when our lives are truly at stake and Georgians are at their most vulnerable. We need well-trained first responders. We need well-trained firefighters. And yes, we need well-trained police officers. Better training does not just help those who put on the uniform, but also leads to safer communities. Although this training center will be about more than training just law enforcement, let me say this about the importance of including police as well. Coming out of the social justice unrest during the summer of 2020, most people agreed that we want and need better trained police officers. In fact, there was almost a universal call for this. And here in Atlanta, we did what we always do. The public and private sectors came together to solve the problem. The business, local government, and law enforcement communities, as well as others, stepped up and said, we will build a state-of-the-art facility to ensure we have the best in our city, because we all deserve it. Regardless of your race, gender, sexual orientation, or where you are from, all Georgians deserve the best, and all Georgians deserve to be safe. The Atlanta Public Safety Training Center is an issue that has been debated, discussed, and voted upon over and over and over again. Let me be clear. As today's announcement shows, looking the other way when violence occurs is not an option in Georgia. If you come to our state and shoot a police officer, hurl Molotov cocktails at law enforcement, set fire to police vehicles, damage construction equipment, vandalize private homes and businesses, and terrorize their occupants, you can and will be held accountable. The Georgia Constitution says it's the paramount duty of government to protect person and property, and that is exactly what we are doing here right now. We will not waver when it comes to protecting our fellow Georgians, enforcing the rule of law, and ensuring those who engage in violence are vigorously pursued and aggressively prosecuted. And I want to thank those that are up here today and many others. Thank you to Director Chris Hosey and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Chief Darren Shearbaum, and the Atlanta Police Department, Colonel Chris Wright, Lieutenant Colonel Billy Hitchens, and the Georgia Department of Public Safety, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and all of our law enforcement partners who over the past year have put their lives on the line to protect all of our fellow Georgians in the face of violence. And I also want to thank Governor Brian Kemp, Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens, the Atlanta Police Foundation, and our private sector partners for their persistence and commitment in ensuring the successful development of the Public Safety Training Center. And with that, we'd be happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Clark. Opponents already are putting out a press release. They're saying that these charges are anti-democratic and they're an attempt to intimidate activists. What's your response?
Our job is to enforce the laws of the state, and as you can tell in this indictment, this is about violent acts, plain and simple. The individuals who have been charged are charged with violent acts. We feel very good about our case, and we will continue to prosecute it to the best of our ability.
Carl, why did you present this to the Fulton County grand jury, not DeKalb County, where the training center is actually being built? And something you noticed in the indictment is the names of the grand jurors were not there, like other indictments. What is there a particular reason why?
I'm going to introduce John Fowler, who's the head of our prosecutions division, to answer that question.
Good afternoon. So two questions. The first was why Fulton County and not DeKalb County. Georgia racketeering law allows that, and we availed ourselves of the Georgia racketeering law to do that. Anywhere that a predicate act or an overt act in furtherance of a conspiracy occurred, in any county where that occurred is where you can indict the case, and we chose Fulton County. The second question, we're going to decline to answer at this time. We're unable to answer that right now.
Mark, do you plan to try all 61 at once, or are you going to try to separate them?
We're not going to talk about strategy on the case right now, just talk about the indictments.
Can you talk about the origin? You mentioned the date, May 25th, 2020. That was 11 months before this facility was even proposed. How is that date relevant to this conspiracy?
So for the most part, we don't want to get too far into the facts. We'll let that play out in the courtroom, but if you take a look at the indictment, it does tie it as an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. So at that point, we're just going to leave it at that. That's what the indictment alleges, and we'll let the rest of it play out in the courtroom.
Well, you know the significance of George Floyd's death was May 25th, 2020. Is that why that date was chosen, and how did this all start then?
Again, there are certain things that we're going to let play out in the courtroom. We're going to let that play out in the courtroom. And there will be evidence put up, there will be testimony, and we'll let that go up in front of the jury.
Deputy.
You mentioned using the jurisdiction of Fulton County because that's what the state racketeering law allows. Is there, can you talk a little bit about whatever head bumping might have come between the AG's office and the DeKalb District Attorney's office, which made DA Boston step away from the prosecution?
Oh, no, you'd have to ask her about that, but look, we've been proud of this case. We've had this case from the very beginning. We've taken the lead on this case. Again, you can see the work that's gone into it. We're proud of this case. We're going to make sure that we hold accountable those that are engaged in acts of violence.
I'm talking with some of those who have been named. They say we don't know each other. Some of us, we don't know any of the other 61. We're all being lumped together. Can you tie how they're all connected? Some were handing out flyers. Some were part of a financial part of this. Some were more active in the violent acts. Can you connect the dots? How are they all conspiring together?
At this point, the indictment speaks for itself.
All these people have been arrested before, have been charged before with other charges. What happens to those charges? Are they expected to be surrendering soon here in Fulton County, or what's going to happen?
That will play out. That they will, in some way, shape, or form, have to be processed through the jail because warrants will issue out of Fulton County. But as for the other charges, we haven't made a decision on the other charges at this point. They are still outstanding, but everyone who's charged in this indictment who has not previously been arrested in Fulton County will have to process through the jail in some way, shape, or form.
Can you discuss the decision to use racketeering for this enterprise, or this alleged enterprise?
Sure, and it kind of goes back a little bit to the question just a moment ago about whether people have to know each other. When you allege a conspiracy to commit racketeering, there's no requirement under Georgia law that they know each other. The whole purpose of the Georgia racketeering law is that they're all working in some way, shape, or form towards the same goal, and they formed a conspiracy to do that. That doesn't necessarily mean that every person has to talk to every single person. All you have to do is commit one overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy with the others, and then you can be guilty of racketeering. So that's why, is because it's a large case, and so if you want to tie everybody together and they're all trying to do the same thing, racketeering is the appropriate charge.
Can you talk about what sentences these defendants might face if convicted?
It depends on the different defendants. I won't go into all of them today, but based upon different charges that different people are charged with, racketeering carries 5 to 20 years. Anything that's an attempt, such as attempted arson, is half in the state of Georgia. The money laundering, I believe off the top of my head, is up to 20 years. And then I believe domestic terrorism is 5 to 35.
Chief Sherwood, can you tell us a bit about your involvement, your agency's involvement in this investigation? It started way before you became chief, and now it's here with an indictment.
Certainly, the Atlanta Police Department is appreciative of our partners in law enforcement. As you will note as you read the indictment, a lot of these, in fact, the majority of these cases, these crimes happened outside the city of Atlanta. So we did not have the ability to investigate where we needed to investigate to stop the criminal activity that was occurring. So we are appreciative of our state partners, the GBI, the Georgia State Patrol, of our partners at the FBI and the ATF. They have all been part of this investigation because those that are engaged in the criminal acts, for the most part, are from Georgia, and for the most part weren't committing those crimes in the city of Atlanta. Some were. And I think it's important to note that today a group of individuals are being held accountable that have endangered the voice of the peaceful that wanted to speak on this matter and to engage in how our law enforcement officers trained and are engaged in how green space should be used. And this group of individuals were suppressing the voice of those that wanted to engage in proper dialogue with their government and their elected officials. And so we want to thank our partners for coming to this cause to be able to hold those accountable that have used crime and criminal acts to stop the public safety training center.
Attorney General Carr, what's your timeline?
Not going to talk about the strategy, but today was an important day to send a message that we're not going to allow violence to occur in this state. Then from here on out, it's part of the legal process.
Okay, that's all I have time for, but if you guys just want to email me, let me know of any questions you have, and we'll get those answered.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I'm sorry. Do we have a date for surrender or not? Or both dates?
Thanks, Will.